Okay, so far, even though what we did was pretty cool, what we have here is mostly just an if statement with different keywords. So each of these is an if, else if, else if, else if, else. So why can't we just use an if statement? Well, let's see how switch statements really shine by adding a few more values to the array. So in here, I'm going to add a comma, and I'll add LGW. I'll add another comma, and I'll add JFK, and finally, ORY. Now, these new additions are the second international airports in London, New York, and Paris, respectively. So let's go back to our switch statement. You'll notice now immediately that when the for loop executes, and once we hit LGW, GFK, and ORY, in addition to DXB, we don't know which cities these airports are in. So now we've printed out 4 times. I don't know which city that airport is in because we hit the default statement 4 times. We want to print the name of the city depending on the airport just like before. But now we have some new airports. If we were using an if statement, to get this to work, we would have to add an else clause for the new airports, an else if clause, or we could use a logical operator to create one compound expression for that city. For example, we do something like this. If airport codes 0 would say equal, double equals to check the equality, we'll say LGA, or airport codes 0 double equal JFK, then we'll print New York. As you can see, this is already a bit hard to read, and there are a couple places where we can make mistakes. The string that we write here, we could forget to do double equals, we could do not equals by mistake. It's a bunch of things, right? With a switch statement, it's so much easier. Each case can match against multiple values, and that's why I said pattern earlier. And to do this, we simply separate each value with a comma. So in this case, we'll say, if the airport that we're considering, if the value that we're considering is either LGA or JFK, then print New York. So now you'll see New York is printed at the beginning when we hit LGA, and then the second last value is New York again. And that's all it took to make this a compound expression. So let's do this for the rest. So we'll say if this is either LHR or using a comma, we'll add 2 values. We'll say LGW, print London. And finally, if this is CDG or ORY, then print Paris. And that's it. There's no limit really to how many values each case statement can match against. If you look in the results area, you'll see that New York, London, and Paris were matched 2 times each. Hong Kong was matched once, and we got the default result for the Dubai International Airport because we didn't provide a case for it. But let's take this a step further. Let's go back to the other example we used when discussing control flow, the temperature. Now this time, let's use Fahrenheit to be fair. For the purposes of weather, temperature in Fahrenheit goes from 32, freezing point, to like 120 in some extreme cases. Rather than writing out a specific value for the temperature, I'm going to generate it randomly. I'm going to write some code. Don't worry about what's going on here. So I'll do import GameKit. I'll say let random temperature equal gk random dot random source dot shared random dot next int with upper bound 150. So don't worry about what's going on here. I'm just using some of the code Apple provides to generate a random number that goes from 0 to 150. We'll talk more about functions in the future, and you can come back to this example and poke around. For now, it just makes the example a bit more interesting to work with. You'll see that 11 was our randomly generated number, and every time I hit enter or evaluate the code again by hitting the play button, we should get a new random number. So earlier, we used a compound if-else statement to print out the items of clothing we should add to our wardrobe based on the weather. Let's combine 2 of the new concepts we've learned in this course, ranges and switch statements, to make that logic easier. So again, we're going to start with the switch statement and the value that we're going to switch on, or the value that we're going to consider. In this case, the value we want to consider and match against a bunch of different values is this random temperature. we'll say random temperature. Case statements support matching across a range that we provide. So rather than specifying an upper and lower bound for temperature values using an AND operator, we can use ranges to provide a range of values. So here's what I mean. For a temperature range of 0 degrees to 32 degrees, that's mind-numbingly cold, so forget clothes, just don't go out. So here we'll start with a case statement again, but instead of providing a single value to match against, we can provide a range. So we can say 0, ... or period, and then we'll use an angle bracket and 32. So if you remember what we learned in ranges, this is the half open range operator, which means that our values go from 0 to 1 less than 32. So 32 is not included, it's the values from 0 to 31. Now, if the temperature falls anywhere between this range, if random temperature is anywhere between 0 and 32, then we're going to print, forget clothes, you are basically a popsicle. Let's add a few more cases. So in here, we'll say case 32. So this range starts at 32 and goes all the way to 45, including the number 45. Then we'll print, it's quite cold. Oops, syntax error. It's quite cold. You'll need a jacket. For the next case, which will go from 45 all the way to 70. Now you'll notice we have a mistake here. Over here, we're including the number 45, and here our range starts at 45. So what if the value is 45? Which one do we match? We'll fix that by using a half open range operator. Then we're going to print, it's a bit chilly. I recommend wearing a light sweater. For the last case, let's go from 70 all the way to 100. And in this case, we'll say print, it's quite hot, t-shirt weather. And then if the temperature is higher or lower than this, we'll say default, don't even bother to go out. Okay, so now look at that. The random temperature generated was 146. Is 146 between 0 and 32? No, it's not. Is it between 32 and 45? It's not. We can match on every single case and we'll return false. So finally, we hit the default statement, which prints out, don't even bother to go out. Let's hit enter again so that we generate a new temperature. And now the new temperature, which is random, is 25. Okay, 25 is between 0 and 32, so we hit that first case and it says, forget clothes, you're basically a popsicle. Isn't that awesome? A switch statement can match on more than just a single value. Hopefully, this glimpse into the flexibility of the switch statement should show you why they're preferred over if statements. Control flow helps us add logic to our code and define various paths for this logic so that we can take different actions based on a set of conditions. We've learned a lot of new things here, so right before we wrap up, I've provided 2 challenges. One is somewhat straightforward, so I'll let you tackle that on your own. The second requires a bit of explanation, and there are different ways that you can solve it. So I've provided a video to explain the problem and another video with the solution. In between the two, I trust that you will try your best and work through the problem yourself. Have fun!